welcome to the Men on the Path to Love podcast, the relationship anxiety episode. I'm Bill Simpson, your host. I coach men who are struggling in relationship, how to communicate effectively, build trust, and deepen intimacy so they can be the best version of themselves in relationship and live the life they love. So what is relationship anxiety anyway? Well, the definition says relationship anxiety refers to feelings of worry, fear, or insecurity that a person can experience within an intimate relationship. It involves ongoing and excessive concerns about different aspects of the relationship, like the stability of the relationship, the level of commitment from their partner, or maybe the fear of being rejected or abandoned. Now, those with relationship anxiety may have unwanted thoughts, be in doubt a lot of the times, and feel uneasy about the current state and or the future state of their relationship. And this can show up in different ways, like needing reassurance all the time, being jealous or possessive, having a fear of being alone, or always wanting validation from their spouse or partner. So why do some folks have relationship anxiety? Where does it come from? Well, it can stem from a variety of factors, like past relationship experiences, like the relationship they were in ended suddenly, or the person just up and left without explanation, or did the partner or spouse cheat on them, and so on. Another factor can be the person's particular attachment style, meaning did they grow up having at least one primary caregiver that was there for them? It can make a huge difference in the emotional and social development of the child. For example, did their parents give them up for adoption? Or did one parent that they were close to leave and never returned or died? That's what happened in my case. My mother gave custody of my brother and me to my father when I was around 8 years old. And I never saw her after that, and she died when I was 13. And that created an abandonment issue for me that certainly impacted my relationships before I eventually got help. Self-esteem issues is another contributing factor to relationship anxiety. Having low self-esteem or low self-worth can cause you to be a people pleaser, giving up yourself for the sake of others' needs. And that can take its toll after a while. And having any other underlying anxiety disorders can certainly play into relationship anxiety. And I want to add that even if you were raised in a healthy or peaceful environment where your parents were loving and present, guess what? You could still have relationship anxiety because you may be afraid you won't be able to have a healthy relationship because how much it means to you to have one. Yeah, anxiety is tricky like that. So it's obvious that relationship anxiety can negatively impact your relationship, right? Yeah, it can affect the emotional well-being of both parties, and it may also influence relationship dynamics, how they communicate and how they are intimate with each other. And more specifically, for men with relationship anxiety, the research says that it can have a significant impact on their relationships in a variety of ways, like having trouble communicating effectively, expressing their thoughts, feelings, and needs to their spouse or partner. There may be miscommunications or conflicts due to not being able to make themselves vulnerable in a way that their spouse or partner can relate. A big one for men with relationship anxiety is attachment insecurity. And what this would look like is being clingy, needing to be reassured or validated all the time. And this ties into fear of rejection or abandonment. And let me tell you, this is a big turnoff for women, and it can definitely put a strain on the relationship. Men with relationship anxiety may be susceptible to more conflict in the relationship. They may be more sensitive to what they see as a threat of rejection, and they tend to get defensive and react with anger or aggression, or they could become more withdrawn and isolate. There can be trust issues with relationship anxiety. Jealousy or possessiveness happens a lot. Always questioning whether their spouse or partner is cheating. And another big one with men in relationship anxiety is that they can withdraw emotionally. Yeah, they're afraid to be vulnerable and emotionally present, so they end up withdrawing in order to cope. Now, any one of these factors alone can cause instability in a relationship, much less a combination of some or all of what I mentioned. What comes to mind for me is the story of Wayne, not his real name. He had relationship anxiety. And giving you a little background, he was basically abandoned as a child. His mother had gotten pregnant with him at a young age, and the father was AWOL. Mom struggled being a parent and had no support and could barely make ends meet. And without going into details, when Wayne was around 5 years old, the Department of Human Services came and ended up putting Wayne in foster care. And Wayne was a good kid, yet he got bounced around from different foster homes until he was 18 years old. Fortunately, Wayne was an excellent student and got a scholarship to a local university. He graduated cum laude and went on to become a successful chemist at a major pharmaceutical company. Along the way, though, Wayne was never really interested in being in a relationship. He was focused solely on his schooling and his career until he met Annie. Annie was a chemist at the same company, and they became like Forrest and Jenny, peas and carrots and all that. Well, they ended up getting married, and for the first year or so, things were great between them. Eventually, Wayne's relationship anxiety started to come into play. Annie had gotten a job at another company, and so Wayne didn't get to see Annie every day at work anymore. And he started to get clingy at home. He was feeling jealous and would ask Annie a lot of questions, and he was getting really possessive, and he didn't want her to work there anymore. All kinds of stuff was going on with him. Well, it got to the point where Annie had had enough and suggested that they go to couples counseling. And thank goodness Wayne was open to it, because once the therapist got wind of his history of abandonment, she suggested that he go to therapy to work on his abandonment issues. Annie was very supportive and compassionate, as it all began to make sense to her why Wayne was acting the way he was. Wayne started his personal growth journey by processing the events of his childhood, being abandoned by his biological parents and various foster parents, and coming to terms with the trauma of it all. Having compassion for himself, for all that he went through. He worked on his self-awareness and the impact his behavior had on Annie. Wayne learned communication skills to help him with expressing his thoughts and feelings to Annie in a way that she could take him in. He also learned some coping skills to help deal with his anxiety. Things like breathing exercises, mindfulness strategies, journaling, meditation, and exercise. And he took his self-care seriously and was committed to his growth. And he saw it as a process that he would continue for a lifetime. Annie was committed to her growth as well. So Wayne and Annie were once again like Forrest and Jenny, peas and carrots, and living the life they love. So dealing with relationship anxiety can be very challenging, no doubt. Yet there is hope in that there are ways to grow and heal from it. Relationship anxiety can be different for each individual, and it can be quite complicated. That's why it's a good idea to seek help from a therapist or a coach that has had experience working with relationship anxiety and can give the proper guidance, support, and implement specific strategies to address each individual's needs. Here's a quote from Shiva Raja, who specializes in relationship anxiety. It says, quote, "Anxiety would prefer you to stay comfortable in safe but ultimately fruitless relationships. It would rather not face the pain, rejection, and unmet needs of childhood. And it certainly would prefer if you didn't attempt to grow and evolve. Thank you very much." Unquote. Yeah, and miracles can happen when you do commit to your growth and evolution. And that will do it for this episode of the Men on the Path to Love podcast, the Relationship Anxiety episode. I'm Bill Simpson, your host. Thanks for listening, and I hope you found it helpful. So, most of the men I see in my practice are middle-aged, right? And one of the reasons they see me is because they're having a so-called midlife crisis. I see them struggle with their feelings of restlessness and dissatisfaction, and sometimes overall dread about life. Does this sound familiar to you? Well, on the next episode of the Men on the Path to Love podcast, I talk about how to navigate the rough waters of a midlife crisis and live the life you love. Please join me for the Managing the Midlife Crisis in Relationship episode. And remember, if you have any questions or issues about your relationship you need help with, if you have any topics you'd like for me to cover, or give me some feedback about the podcast, please email me at bill@pathways2livingwell.com. That's bill@pathways2livingwell.com. You can also find my email address in the show notes. And as always, if you know someone you think might benefit from listening to this podcast, please share the link and share the love. And until next time, keep your heart open and stay on the path to love.